Hello, everybody, and welcome back to SportsGamer, and welcome back to the Wraparound, the show where we take a look at all the happenings going on throughout the ECL and its 5 tiers. And of course, as always, there is so much to talk about, so I want to get right down to business at the top of the heap, of course, in talking about the Elite division. Of course, our top tier here, the 16 top teams NHL esports scene on the European side of things at the very least. Although, of course, when we get into talking about these teams, and specifically our top team, there's an argument they're the best team in the world right now, certainly. Now, something I do need to point out here, of course, our typical week of action ends on a Thursday. I typically record the show on a Friday or into Saturday. There have been a couple of games that have been played that have slightly altered the schedule a little bit as teams are making up games. I'll make note of that as well, but it is worth noting that if something is out of date or inaccurate, I apologize for that. But again, it's teams making up games that will often lead to those issues. We start off top of the board, though. It is Parasite. For the 4th straight week, they find themselves in first place here in this division. And I mean, what more can be said aside from, hey, let's zoom in on them here a little bit. They did finally lose their first game of the season, that being to Totorit, who find themselves in second, but they maintain the best goals for, best goals for per game pace in the Elite division. They maintain the lowest goals against average in the division. After 4 weeks of play, they still had the top power play percentage, a perfect penalty kill with the fewest amount of penalty minutes, and still had the top face-off percentage as well. Just absolutely crushing it all season long. And of course, it doesn't really change with the key players either. You had Vatu at the end of week 4 staying first in scoring with 63 points. As you can see, he is now up to 71 after a subsequent series was played. He was also first in goals with 41, and already for week 5 has added 5 more goals. Nicky Dangles ended the week second in scoring on 57 points, up from 50, as you can tell, already for week 5, another 13 points for him. Was also first in assists, but dropped out of the top 10 in goals, but is now up to 23. Benito went from 3rd to 4th in scoring with 52 points, a 9-point week in week 4. Obviously, you can see what his stat line is now. He did drop out of the top 10 in goals after the end of week 4. Teemu, first in defensive scoring after a 7-point week, up to 37 points, stayed second in defensive goals with 10. And then Tombo did drop from 2nd in defensive scoring down to being tied for 8th, but as you can see, still well over a point per game. And in terms of the goaltending, Vincere was the highlight. Went from first to 2nd in save percentage after it dropped a little bit, but was still first in goals against average at a 1.3, which you can see he is still at now. And of course, Nikke, a perfect 10-0 as well. Parasite absolutely crushing it. And of course, as I mentioned, right, we've seen some differences already. Week 5 technically getting underway with some makeup games being played, and they are still on an absolutely phenomenal pace. Now, technically, at the end of week 4, it was Mustakalta who found themselves in second on pace. But as you can see, with those catch-up games being played, it is now Totorit in second. But I do want to talk about Mustakalta next because they held their position in second. We'll see if they can, reestablish that at the end of this 5th week. But a perfect penalty kill on the season up until these makeup games, just to drive everything out of date. You got to love it. But the key players for Mustakalta through week number 4, a lot of familiar names that we've seen numerous times. Aro went from 5th to 4th in scoring on to 52 points. He already added 4 more this week, but he was up from 37, so it was a big week for him, and then was 2nd in the league in goals with 34 after an 11-goal week. And again, decent start for him in week number 5. We've talked about Mise before on the defensive side of things, still top 5 in defensive scoring with 28 points. It was a 10-point week 4 for them. And then, of course, in goal, got to talk about Latve from 5th to 3rd in save percentage. Also, at the end of week 4, leading the Elite division in shutouts with 4. So it's been a phenomenal season for Mustakalta, but also for Totorit. I mean, we were going to talk about them sooner rather than later. Anyway, well, they are technically in second now. At the end of the week, they were in third, holding that position, really off the strength of no longer leading the Elite Division in PIMS. And then you get to talk about the individual performances as well. Their leading scorer, Profilipaki, able to, still do very, very well. Did drop in scoring from fourth down to being tied for seventh, went from third in goals down to fourth, but obviously it's still a tremendous performance, right? While someone like Oyala did drop out of the top 10 in point production, but you can see, again, it's 48 points in 26 games. It just so happens that the standard for scoring in the Elite Division right now is crazy. Sega Sormi was still third in defensive goals with 7 at the end of the last match week, still on 7 goals currently. And then we got to talk about Stammer in goal. This could be the favorite for goaltender of the season. Still had the most goalie wins at the end of the week with 18. Still has the most total saves. Went from second to having the top save percentage in the Elite Division, and went from fifth to fourth in goals against average. Getting better is the goaltending and the defense of Totori as the season's gone on. And again, now we see it a slightly higher, literally as small of a gap as it can be at 0.01 in terms of a point per game pace over Mustakalta, but just 4 games left in this season for Totorit. Voitamaton, regardless, find themselves still in fourth, holding that position as well. We didn't see any change to the top 4 through match week 4. In terms of the numbers here, it was Eki moving from 5th to being tied for 4th in scoring with 52 points, up from 37. So a big week for Eki. Tempinen still top 7 in scoring on 49 points after a 17-point week, and is still top 5 in goals with 26 after an 8-goal week. Jamal the Man on the defensive side of things, still top 5 in scoring, 28 points, had a 10-point week. And then the goaltending, of course. We knew this was going to be a dynamic duo. Hanselinho, still top 5 in save percentage, and still second in goals against average in the league, with Zande, or Sibelius, of course, as I learned to know him as, jumping to third in goals against average in the league at a 1.8. So things are still looking good for Voitamaton, but Mustakalta and Totorit are the ones that are just a little bit closer to trying to, lock down that second place spot heading into the playoffs, presuming, of course, Parasite does not slip and drastically slip over their last 10 games. We go to Goons, who moved up 1 position into the 5th spot despite having the worst power play percentage in Elite and still having the most penalties in Elite. And of course, that's tied into the fact that they hit everything that moves, more than 200 hits above second place currently. But we get into talking about the big-time names for Goons this season. We start with Canary, top 9 in scoring, at a 16-point week, getting up to 47 points, and has still maintained the most hits in the league with 284. Kontala, still top 9 in goals with 22. We talked about the penalties. Shout out to Lexa, who once again leads the league in penalty minutes with 26. But on defense, big week for Sisu, jumping from 5th to 2nd in defensive scoring, up from 18 points, is also tied for 1st in the league in blocked shots with 29, while Easycha Sniper, still 4th in the league in D scoring with 29 points, up from 19, and is still 1st in defensive goals with 11 after a 3-goal week. Have to mention the goaltender as well. Circula, 22 of the 26 games played so far. 4th now in save percentage, down from 3rd place as the save percentage took about a 1.2% hit. But it has been a phenomenal season for Goons compared to what some people, I think, may have thought it would be. Again, they've been kind of up and down, as we've mentioned, throughout the standings and into some trouble over the last couple of seasons, but they have been stellar, to say the least. The problem for them and anybody that finishes in those bottom 4 playoff spots, it is not an easy playoff matchup, no matter what, and no matter who you end up playing. In 6th place, down 1 position, Polski Boys. Now 2 key players for them. Yet again, we have to mention Tunkelia, still top 5 in goals at 26. at the end of the week. Of course, now on 28, it was an 8-goal week for him, and obviously off to a really good start to continue this week. And then in goal, Mistari Tiku, the goals against average dropped in terms of him having one of the top 3, if not top 5, in the league. And that would certainly perhaps explain the 1 position drop for the Polski boys. But on a 1.58 point per game average, they're still looking pretty good with 6 games to go. A lot would have to go wrong, and a lot would have to go right for other teams on the outside looking in terms of Polski boys not making the playoffs. But hey, crazier things can happen. But they held that 5th place spot for 2 weeks, now down into 6th place. The Blackjacks hold position number 7, and again, we got to talk about 3 key players for them. First and foremost, it's Kermit at the top from 7th to 9th now in scoring on 46 points, and also from 7th to 9th in terms of goals. An unbelievable week 1 pace for Kermit. He's still having a stellar season. He's a goal per game, but he just hasn't been able to keep up that pace compared to some other players in the league. Psycho Skills still finds himself 3rd in defensive scoring with 30 points after an 8-point week, is also once again the league leader in interceptions. And then Tony had a big week as well, went from unranked to being tied for 4th in defensive goals at 6. So the Blackjacks still on pace to make the playoffs, but as we know, crazy things can happen in the last match week. Mythics find themselves in 8th place, up 2 positions this week, despite maintaining the worst face-off percentage in Elite. It actually dropped from a 43.65 down to what you see on screen. And Koloslav for them, their key player, dropped out of the top 10 in terms of goals, yet here they are, up 2 positions in terms of point pace. So, good week for Mythics, to say the least. Hamo find themselves in 9th, moving up 2 spots. Have to talk about Emil, of course, the captain, moving from 7th down to 8th in terms of goals, now with 24 on the season, but up from 17. Snipery loses his lead in terms of total blocked shots, but Hamo have continued that charge as they were aiming to do after, as they identified a tough schedule to begin the season. They're on the cusp of being able to sneak into the playoffs here with 6 games left to go. Obviously, it's a little bit tough. Blackjacks, Mythics have games at hand and a higher point pace. It's not impossible, though, for Hamo to make it. We have Exon down 1 position, now in 10th, and now with the worst goals for per game pace in the league at a 1.95. Absolutely stunning. The only real positive is that Pikari no longer has the most penalty minutes, I should say, in the league. Genuinely stunning that Exon have struggled this much in terms of finding their offensive touch. I don't know if anybody predicted struggles quite like this. That said, they are still within striking distance of the playoffs, but 10 games left, 2/3 of the way through the season. You got to figure it out now. Tiki Talk find themselves up 3 positions, their first rise in the standings in 2 weeks, as they are now in 11th and no longer with the worst goals against pace in the division. And man, when we talk about them, we have, of course, talked about, sending in clips for hashtag ECL25 clips on social media. And boy, we had a heck of a clip this week as Tiki Talk scored what has been researched to be the fastest goal this season. And it is worth noting as well, it was scored by It's Party Time, who does have the fastest goal in Elite Division history way back in 2017 for ECL Season 4. Scored that goal in 18 seconds of game time. This one, 25 seconds into the game. So not an uncommon thing for It's Party Time in terms of scoring these goals. And in terms of the stats, I mean, it wasn't just a quick goal that turned things around for Tiki Talk. It was his scoring in general, as he went from 7th up to 3rd in scoring and in total points, up to 55 now, up from 32. So a gigantic week for Party Time, and went from unranked outside the top 10 to 7th in goals with 25. And all that happening while Tamex dropped out of the top 10 in goals on 19 now in 20 games. But another big part is, okay, clearly if one person is doing really well, another person kind of drops off a bit, the rest of the team must be doing well. And that is the case. Savinainen went from being unranked to now being tied for 4th in defensive goals with 6 and is tied for 1st in block shots with 29. So a big week for Tiki Talk as they try to get a little bit more separation away from one of the potential relegation series spots. But of course, as we'll talk about the next few teams, you'll see these points. It's very close. Roots Gaming find themselves up 1 position this week as well, now into 12th. Key player for them, yet again, surprise, it's Sokolo. From 4th to now 3rd in goals with 28, up from 19 at the end of week number 3. Propelling this team, certainly, in terms of the goal scoring to try and avoid one of those drop zone positions, which brings us to who initially ended the week in 13th, and that is Renascore. Of course, now they have been jumped by Vesapampa again based off of pace, but Renascore had moved up 2 spots into 13th, no longer having the worst goals for per game pace, and finally scoring a power play goal. But as you can see, they have been surpassed once again by Vesapampa, who finished week 4 down 6 positions in 14th. Crazy. Absolutely crazy to me. I mean, no longer had the worst PK in the league. You know, they're still not the most physical team in the world, but just a brutal run of form for Vesapampa. But clearly, higher point per game pace now than Renascore, but they have just had a crazy up and down season, which can also describe another primarily Finnish contingent, that being the Fallon Coal Miners, down 3 positions this week into 15th, having lost 9 spots over the last 2 weeks, and now sporting the worst goals against average in the league. They have the worst penalty kill percentage in the league. Even Furion lost his league lead for most interceptions. It has been a disastrous run for the Fallon Coal Miners. The only saving grace is, of course, the automatic relegation spot has already been decided. So that is everything going on with the Elite division. Of course, 2 things worth noting. I always talk about the ECL player license. We want to make note here, another perk that you get from having an ECL player license, 3 months free to the SportsGamer Health and Performance program that is designed to support your journey towards enhanced performance and well-being both in and out of the game. To get your free membership, simply check your email. There should already be an email with a link and a code there to start off on your journey. So make sure to check that out. And of course, we always mention with the player licenses that we have our live final coming up for the ECL Elite division this upcoming February at Assembly, as the top 2 teams will go head-to-head to be crowned champions for our Winter 25 season. So keep an eye out for that as well. Of course, that is an attendable event for anybody, but again, another perk for those player license holders. But we'll see. I mean, again, in terms of the Elite division, just how quickly things can change. You already saw a good example there for how rapidly out of date information can prove to be. Next up, let's talk about our Pro Division, Tier 2 of the ECL ladder, and we will start off with Group number 1, where holding the top position is yet again Gotham Knights, sporting the lowest goals against average in their group, the top power play percentage. They did lose their perfect penalty kill as well. Key player for them, Kusan, in goal, drops in save percentage, but does still have the most goalie wins with 20 wins in 24 appearances. So the Gotham Knights doing their best and certainly on track to potentially find themselves back in the Elite tier. We have Zenigame holding their position in 2nd place. 2 key players for them. We have to mention Imosi, who we have mentioned at times throughout this season, now up to 4th in goals with 35 in 24 games. And Ubiexor in goal, now 2nd in save percentage at an 85.28, is splitting time with Esko Itika. But obviously, Ubiexor, very strong on the season. So Zenigame, still in a good position. You have D-Lock up in third, still holding down that position as well. No movement thus far until we get to Nova, up 2 positions now and into fourth, sporting the best goals for per game in the group. And 2 key players for them, I've mentioned them a couple times throughout the season. Nestor as their top scorer, drops out of the top 5 in scoring in the league in general and goes from 1st to 5th in goals. It once more shows you just how intense the competition is, because 66 points, 35 goals in 28 games is stellar. While King of Apes, on the other hand, retains his first place position in terms of defensive scoring and also moved into first place in defensive goals with 12 at the end of the week. Already has 2 more to kick off week number 5, as again, Nova look to make up a little bit of time. So strong push from them as the season has continued on. Now, originally, once again, we have one of these situations. It was Otuksit who found themselves in 5th at the end of the week, up 2 positions, while Blackbirds were in 6th and down 2 positions. These 2 teams have obviously swapped their current locations in the standings. Let's talk about Otuksit first, though. No longer having the highest power play percentage, but 2 key players for them, both on the defensive and goaltending side of things, as they moved up 2 positions. And it's not surprising when you're able to have, someone like Yukas, who is leading the pro division in interceptions at the end of the week, and Roysto, who was tied for the most shutouts with 5. But Blackbirds currently do find themselves up ahead, and a big part of the reason for that, maintaining the top face-off percentage in the group, which was actually up from 53.3%, despite the fact that Almio dropped in goal-scoring pace. Blackbirds did fall down 2 positions, but again, they have made up some ground now, so we'll keep an eye out on that. 7th place, end of the week, and even now, it's the Old-Timers, who also fell 2 positions, and unfortunately for them, sporting the worst goals for per game pace in the group. And Tisalino, as a result, in goal, dropped in his wins pace. So the Old-Timers trying to hold on to a playoff spot down the stretch, as Vizio, again, another team that has moved up. I feel the need to continue to emphasize that, and I apologize. But they were originally tied for 9th at the end of this past week, while Exa were in 8th. So we'll talk about Exa first, who moved up 1 spot to claim 8th. They did lose their highest goals for per game pace and developed the worst face-off percentage in the group at the end of the match week. But they did still have a couple of key players, and we've talked about them all season long. Adri, going from 3rd to 4th in scoring, was still 2nd in goals at the end of the week, while Vinci did drop out of the top 5 in scoring. But again, you can see how close it is at this point in time. Very much expect to see Vinci back into that top 5 mix. But then you have Vizio, who, as mentioned, ended up being tied for 9th at the end of the match week. That moved them up 4 positions. And right now, they're on pace to make it yet another position and potentially back into the playoffs. They've moved up 6 spots in the past 2 weeks, and they might not be done. So this is an incredible bounce back for them down the backstretch of this season. While Devils were the other team tied for 9th. And did I say the other team? Because, yeah, there were 3 teams tied for 9th. SSK Esports involved in that as well. For SSK, they had moved up 2 positions despite maintaining the worst penalty kill percentage in the group. Fewest hits, fewest PIMs, which is nice, but, it also kind of says, okay, they probably haven't been on the PK too much and haven't really gotten to work on it. Worth noting for them, key player in goal, Broken Rice, who ended week 4 as the goaltender with the top save percentage and the lowest goals against average. We'll see if they can keep those numbers up. While for Devils, hey, Bugamir has the most PIMs again. You got that going on for you. They had dropped 1 spot down into that tie. It just shows how close the race is at this stage of the season. We move down to the team in 12th, Nordic Stars, holding that position, no longer having the worst face-off percentage in the group at the end of the last match week, but they do have the most penalty minutes. They also have the most hits as a result, as they've had all season long. The two key players over the past week for them, we have to talk about Katanarski one more time. Now tied for second in defensive goals with 8. Did not score at all in the past week, but does maintain the most blocked shots at the end of match week 4. While their goaltender, and actually let's go back here, Sake the Engineer, the most saves in the Pro Division, which can be a positive because, hey, you're stopping the puck, but it can also be a sign of some defensive struggles from the team in front of you. Serpents moved up 3 spots to take 13th. They have gone from 9th to 16th to 13th. It's been a really weird season for them. Worth noting, they did finally score a power play goal, so that's cool. Mites moving up 1 position into 14th, finally improving their goals for per game pace, with it no longer being the worst in the group at the end of week 4, while Kumanelta Klubele find themselves in 15th and dropping 5 positions down from 10th. They are sporting the worst power play in the group. They lost their perfect penalty kill, but they do still have the top PK at 95%. So they got that going for them. They are still tough to beat in that regard. And then bringing up the rear here, Deadly Phantoms down 2 more positions. The worst goals against average in the group. On the bright side, they no longer have the most amount of penalty minutes, but it is still just stunning to me to see a team with that much experience struggling to this extent. So that is the picture in group number 1. Let's take a look at group number 2. Surprise, surprise. They've held the top spot all season long. It's No Street Sports with the best goals for per game average at a 5.09. They've led this category all season. It's actually gone up from a 4.64. They no longer have the top power play percentage, nor do they have the lowest PK, though. So, trade-offs. They also have the fewest PIMs in their group, despite having the most amount of hits. So it's interesting. If you can get away with that physicality without taking penalty minutes, then, absolutely do so. Key players for them. They might be getting tired of hearing their names at this point. Toivon, still first in the league in scoring with 85 points, up from 49, while maintaining the most hits in Pro Division. Hisei, up to third in goals with 38. On defense, Atzes from third to second in defensive scoring, went from 25 points to 47. And Tapu, still second in defensive goals with 8. Did only have a 1-goal week, but No Street have been so stellar all season long and have to be one of, if not the favorites in the Pro Division to make it up to that next tier. You have Aspire with a monster week, moving up 6 positions into second place. This being despite the fact they have the worst penalty kill in the group. I don't get it. I don't get it. The top 2 teams had the 2 worst penalty kills in the group. Figure that one out. Key player for them, Tihizu, 5th in scoring now on 67 points and is already up to 76 as Aspire had played some games before the Monday. So crazy pace for them over the last week. Poggers also moved up 1 spot into 3rd place. They regained the best power play percentage in doing so. And more familiar names to speak of. We have Yakari, their leading scorer, jumped from 3rd up to 2nd with those 82 points, all the way up from 46, and is now 1st in the league in goals with 40. I preface one more time at the end of the match week. Some things might not totally line up anymore, but I can't redo an entire script. I apologize. You have Migo Buna also jumping up to 3rd in the league in scoring with 73 points. And Lauren Javi, we have to mention as well, goes from 2nd to 3rd in defensive scoring, but from 26 points all the way up to 42, and is now tied for 2nd in defensive goals with 8. So Poggers continuing to look good. Another club with a lot of elite experience. Rooftech find themselves tied for 4th place, now up 2 positions this week. Key player for them continues to be Limbe, moving from 4th to being tied for 5th in goals with 34, but it was a 10-goal week. So their star player continuing to do very, very well. While the team that they're tied with at a 1.77, Sawalanche, moved up 3 positions while regaining the disciplinary record for having the fewest penalty minutes. Key player for them, someone like Turtu, who did drop in goal scoring pace at the same time that they're moving up the standings. You have Balbaz on defense, no longer with the most interceptions. Key player for them, though, Mr. Anton. Now third in save percentage at an 84.12 and is tied for the most shutouts with 5. So despite some of the scoring pace falling off a little bit, their defense and their goaltending has gotten better. Eastman Valinta find themselves down 1 position into 6th place. Unfortunately, not too much positive to speak of for them right now. Even key player Luki has dropped in defensive goal pace, while HC Logano have since dropped, but found themselves in 7th place at the end of the match week. That was up 2 positions while they gained the top penalty kill percentage in the group. But you can see here, Björklöven Esport have jumped them. Now, Björklöven did drop 6 positions throughout, in between weeks 3 and 4, but have already picked up the pace a little bit yet again, despite Alpha Boria dropping in goal scoring pace. So we'll see if they can kind of recoup and regain that momentum as match week 5 goes on. 9th place and dropping 6 positions, the Herlev Eagles, right back down to where they were after gaining ground over the last 2 weeks. Only positive, they no longer have the worst goals against average. That's not even a positive, actually. In fairness, it just means the defense struggled a bit. And Provocacia in goal dropped from 3rd in save percentage. It was a bit of a rough week for the Herlev Eagles. I'm trying my best to find a positive. It just didn't happen. 10th place, the Finnish Roosters holding their position. Still the least physical team in the group. Not too much positive to speak of either. Ernati no longer tied for the most blocked shots, and Keskitalo, who I've spoken of very positively over the course of the season, dropped in save percentage and goals against average. Perhaps a positive that they were at least able to hold that position. Golden Sticks maintain 11th position while also maintaining the weakest goals for per game pace in the group. But they also have the best goals against average in the group at a 217. Figure that out. They're tied for the worst power play, but they have the best face-off percentage. I don't know what to make of them. They are bizarre, to say the least. The Nuremberg Ice Tigers up 1 position now into 12th, despite retaking the lead for the most penalty minutes in the group. Again, can't figure that one out. Cheeky Grinders up 1 position into 13th, while Red Bull Munich Esports dropped 2 positions down to 14th. They still have the worst face-off percentage in the group, and they lost their perfect penalty kill. Afterlife yet again holds down 15th position. Only positive for them, they no longer have the most penalty minutes in the group, while Refuse to Lose still at the bottom, maintaining the worst goals against average in the group. They no longer have the most hits. As a result, Sunny no longer has the most PIMs, and they're tied for the worst power play percentage in the group at 12.5%. So despite the fact that we're getting that much closer now to finding out kind of where, the cards are going to fall here for some of these teams, there's still some of these clubs that just don't seem to make any sense. Hey, we're really good in this regard. We're really, really bad in this regard, yet okay, this team's towards the bottom, this team's towards the top. Again, the top 2 teams in Group 2 had the worst penalty kill percentage. I don't know. Pro Division, all of these divisions, even the Elite Division, we had some examples. There's some weird things going on where the math just doesn't quite check out. We move on to our 3rd tier. It is the Light Division, and kicking things off in Group number 1, at the top, maintaining their position, it's Puck Over Glass. They keep the top goals for pace in the group. They keep the top face-off percentage in the group. 2 key players for them. For forwards, we have to talk about Hyde, their leading scorer, 2nd in the league in scoring with 77 points, and 2nd in goals with 48, while Nuzan is the defensive scoring leader with 43 points. So things looking really good for Puck Over Glass at this stage. 2nd place, holding their position once again, Mudu Hockey, despite having the worst penalty kill percentage in the group. You see what I mean? It's really, really weird. They also have the most hits as well at 491, but just another one of those teams. I just don't know what to make of some of the stats that you think would mean like, okay, you're probably going to be lower, yet you're holding that position. It's just weird. A Squad find themselves up 3 positions this week into 3rd place. They no longer have the worst goals against average in the group. That certainly helps. But they now once again have the worst face-off percentage in the group. They're not a very physical team. They're a weird team. That's all I can say. In 4th, now they have since fallen down a couple more spots in terms of pace, but at the end of the past week, it was Farmalaget down 1 position, tied for the fewest PIMs, but clearly that's not the end-all, be-all as things are going wrong. They have dropped down a few more spots. It was HC Videlma who found themselves up 2 positions into 5th, where they still currently reside. But the German Ice Gladiators are the next team to talk about. They originally fell 2 positions down to 6th. At the moment, they are right back into 4th place where they were before and tied at the moment, or at the time, with Farmalaget for the fewest amount of penalties. So, again, a very active scene right now in terms of things changing. Ending the week in 7th, down 2 positions were DEG Esports. They're down even another position already here in week number 5. But DEG ended the week with the top goals against average in the group, the top penalty kill percentage in the group, and that's despite goaltender Miyaza dropping from 3rd in save percentage. We'll talk about Collicott in a minute, because technically it was Black Sharks who finished in 8th at the end of the last week, moving up 2 positions, despite having the worst goals against average in the group and no longer having the lead in hits. Collicott were down into 9th. Dropping a position to get there, but as you can see, they're already back up into 7th after finally scoring a power play goal. They do still have the worst penalty kill in the group at an 80.95, or at least they did, because, hey, look at that. It's already gone up since. So, again, these catch-up games can drastically change the outlook of things, and at least for Collicott, they no longer had the worst face-off percentage at the end of this past week, and still don't, as you might be able to see from some of the other stats. The Carolus Icemen finished their week tied for 10th. They had moved up 1 position to get there, no longer having the worst goals for average or the worst penalty kill. It helps that they no longer have the fewest penalties taken, so that PK got a little bit of extra practice. Key player for them, Ekison, dropping in defensive goal pace, but they still went up a position. So, again, the math doesn't check out. Team Infernus, the team that they are tied with for 10th at the end of the match week, had dropped a position and do have the worst goals for pace in the group, but they have the best power play percentage. Of course they do. And at the bottom, regardless of whether or not it was out of date or not, it is SSK Academy holding that 12th place spot. They maintain the most PIMs taken in the group. Fox individually no longer has the most, but the team as a whole with the most amount of penalties, certainly not helping them. But another group where you can already see the examples of just pieces changing around at a very rapid pace. Group 2, at the end of the match week, it was Project X at the top. They moving up 1 position to take top spot from 2nd, while Tokuku dropped 1 position, despite still having the top goals for average, the lowest goals against average, the fewest amount of PIMs. They did lose having the most amount of hits, but again, for a very physical team like that, no longer having the most amount of PIMs, I guess it makes sense. They did maintain the top face-off percentage, actually gained the best face-off percentage, and a couple of key players for them. We've talked about Yusa Solo a couple of times. They maintained first place in scoring with 82 points, up from 64, and also still first in goals at 50, up from 42. Temu Underdog, we have to mention, went from 2nd to 3rd in scoring at 76, but it was a 16-point week. And then in goal, one more time, why not mention Bobby Python? Did drop in terms of wins and save percentage pace, but is still tied for the light division lead in shutouts with 4. So Tokuku losing 1 position in the standings, still in a very, very good spot, while Ruti holds their position in 3rd, as they do maintain the top power play percentage in the group, the top penalty kill in the group, and goaltender Temeti maintains the most amount of wins. So they're still in a very good spot. The 3rd team over 2 points per game. Fourth position, HC Pustertal Esports, maintaining that spot, the league's most physical team. Key player for them, we have to mention, I imagine it's Lemonsy. First time we get to talk about you this season, but is now tied for first in goals amongst defenders with 9. So certainly a player to keep an eye out on as we go down the stretch. We haven't really gotten too many examples outside of Ruzakuza for key players on Pustertal compared to the rest of the pro division. Vitos Vitya maintain 5th position for yet another week. They have lost their best group leading goals for per game pace. Still at a 4.5 though. They are still as well tied for the fewest amount of penalties taken. Ice Baron Lauf Gaming up 3 positions this week into 6th. Very nice for them. While SCB Esports dropped 1 spot into 7th. They are the team with the most amount of penalty minutes taken, despite Error Victim in particular no longer having the most in the division. And despite the broken logo, Kokai Esports were up 2 positions into 8th place. As Coup de Grace end up being tied for 9th. That has since changed, but ended the week tied for 9th, down 1 position. Still with the lowest power play percentage in the group at the time. That has also changed, as you can tell there, by Woodhands. But no longer the most PIMs, so that was good. And then Iron Fist still first, or tied for first in goals amongst defenders at 9, despite not scoring any goals in the past week. So interesting, how things have already changed for them. They were tied with Boomers, who have already fallen off the pace a little bit. They had moved up 2 positions to be tied for 9th, despite maintaining the worst goals against average in the group, which, at least now, even with a couple of extra games, it was at a 5.25 at the end of week 3, a 5.06 at the end of week 4, and it's still continuing to drop now that they've gotten a few more games in. They have still maintained, though, the worst penalty kill in the group. Woodhands down 4 positions into 11th, and no longer sporting the top face-off percentage in the group at the end of match week 4, while Taisto moved up 1 position to 12th, no longer with the worst goals for pace, and no longer with the worst face-off percentage. So, scoring goals and winning face-offs, that will certainly help move you up a spot in the standings. While the Iserlohn Roosters esports squad were down 1 position, now sporting the worst goals for pace in the group, despite, the fact that they don't take any PIMs. They're tied for the fewest. They're not a very physical team, but they do regain the worst face-off percentage in the group. So the math does check out there. Group number 3, Sune Iko Esport up 4 positions into that top spot. While they no longer have the fewest amount of penalty minutes, they do maintain the worst penalty kill in the group at a 68.42. They also have the worst face-off percentage in the group, so it's kind of surprising to see them this far up. Key player for them, pronunciation might be wrong on this, let me know, but Svana, who is now tied for 2nd in scoring amongst defenders with 36 points. So, again, the math doesn't quite check out, but first place pace right now. They'll certainly take it. Kurtamia Vostan find themselves up 1 position into 2nd. They maintain the lowest goals against average in the group. They also maintain the highest penalty kill percentage in the group, while Datsuki has dropped in that defensive scoring pace. Key player that we have to mention is the goaltender, Masamon, who we have brought up a couple of times, now first in save percentage in the division. So very, very nice there. Hopfen Smoothie HC down 2 positions in the 3rd. They no longer have the fewest hits, but maybe that physicality didn't quite pay off for them. And actually, I believe SUNY Eco have already jumped them yet again in terms of the fewest amount of hits. Macho HC end their week in 4th, up 3 positions in the 4th, while maintaining the top face-off percentage in the group and the top face-off percentage in the group. And defender Dansk maintaining the most blocks as well. Actually, no, not even a defender, a forward, if I'm not mistaken, on 48 points. Apologies for that, but normally you don't see a forward typically leading the way with 49 blocked shots. Does the math check out? Maybe, maybe not, but impressive to say the least. You have Sete Lecurho finding themselves up one position into 5th with the top goals for pace in the group while sporting the fewest amount of penalty minutes. I've mentioned Antti a few times. I'm going to do it again as the leading scorer of the team. Still 4th in the league in scoring with those 73 points, up from 58 at the end of the prior week, and does drop from 3rd to 4th in total goals with 43. It was just a 6-goal week, but Antti, of course, has skill well beyond this division, and of course the light division is an incredibly solid division, but that is an elite level player down in tier number 3. And Cutter, have to mention as well, did drop from 1st down to 3rd in defensive scoring after just a 5-point week, but is on 34 points in 20 games. The Seinäjoki Noms up 2 positions into 6th place. Very good week for them, while Underrated dropped 3 positions, losing their top offensive pace in terms of goals for per game. Psycho dropping in scoring pace, and Zahn as well dropping in terms of scoring pace, and drops from 2nd to 5th in goals with 42, just a 2-goal week. Rough run for Underrated, again dropping 3 positions. Saucer Hockey moving up 1 spot into 8th place. Couple of key players for them. Rantasaki no longer with the most hits. Mazupizu in goal, no longer with the most saves. As we talked about with goaltenders, it's maybe not the worst thing in the world not to have the most amount of saves, though, relative to the rest of the league. Another team with a really rough week, the Dara Stars, down 7 positions from 2nd place to 9th. Just a brutal run with 1 win in their last 10 games. While the Gleimus Hockey Krefeld squad, for the 4th straight week, we've only played 4 weeks, but they maintain 10th position with the worst goals against average in the group. A positive, they no longer have the most amount of penalty minutes. Red Dragon specifically no longer tied for the most amount of PIMs, but they have developed the worst penalty kill in the group, or the worst power play in the group, at an 8%. The penalty kill is not that bad. And, most interceptions for Smokes. I try to find the positives where I can, but for Krefeld right now, it's been a bit rough. Never ideal to see multiple players at a -40 or potentially lower. Once again, you have the Moscow Capitals holding down 11th. Fewest hits in the league, of course, but Akima, who we have to mention yet again, has gone from 2nd to being tied for 1st in defensive goals with 9 on the season. Continues to be a key player for that particular squad. And once again, Game Over Esports at the bottom of the group, maintaining the worst goals for per game average in their group. They did finally score a power play goal, so that's a positive. And they no longer have the worst face-off percentage. Also a positive. But they have regained the league for most penalties taken. Maybe not surprising. They have the most hits in the group. They also have the player with the most PIMs and the most hits in the entirety of the light division, that being Mohikazi, who is just a monster on the ice in terms of the physicality. And goaltender, Hot and Fire, with the most saves in the league. Group number 4, let's talk about the 6 Sticks Misfits holding their position, despite no longer having the best goals for pace. On the bright side, a little bit more discipline. They don't have the most PIMs anymore. They also don't have the most hits, so maybe the physicality calmed down a little bit. Key player for them has to be Lamsa, now 5th in scoring with 70 points on the season. So things still looking pretty good for SSM. While you have Kikakiria once again holding down 2nd place. Key player once again, Yimpa, 3rd in goals with 45 on the season in just 22 games. SSK prospects hold their 3rd place position. They no longer have the top goals against average, nor do they have the top power play percentage, nor does Victor Hall have the most interceptions and has dropped in the defensive scoring pace. But a couple of key things to note, it has to be the two goaltenders, as Lidman now second in save percentage in the league, and the Raws still tied for the league lead in shutouts with 4. So goaltending still a strong suit for SSK prospects, as we have a tie, or at least we did, for 4th place. It was Vita, and including me, Vita holding down 4th place, where they still currently find themselves now on point pace, including me, moved up 1 position. Now they essentially find themselves back in 5th and holding. Worth noting for Vita, though, no longer tie for the most PIMs. So, hey, a little bit more discipline has proven to go a long way. Hockeyholics finding themselves up 2 spots into 6th place, while the VBO Stars dropped 1 position into a tie for 7th at the moment. Now, technically outright in 7th, and in 8th, Pata Halala had moved up 2 spots into that tie for 7th. Now, technically 1, with their key player being Aransi Poika, who is tied for 3rd in save percentage, if I am not mistaken. I clicked on technical disaster, didn't I? I sure did. That's what happened. This is what happens when the standings change. But yeah, for Pata Halala, again, Aransi Poika doing very well so far. Their goaltending in general has done very well so far this season. Technical disaster, you already got a brief look at them. They did technically drop down to 9th and lost 2 spots after potentially, I thought originally, losing their perfect penalty kill. That does not turn out to be the case, so there must have been a stat change there. They no longer have the fewest PIMs as well, though, so they have gotten a little bit of extra work in that regard. You have the Hurricanes holding on to 10th position, although they could be on the rise here. We shall see. Trojans holding on to 11th position, no longer with the worst PK or face-off percentage, so some improvements there. Calipo HC holds 12th place, no longer with the fewest amount of hits. And then Bellissimo, for the 4th straight week, maintain dead last in the group. They do no longer have the worst goals for pace or the worst goals against, and they finally scored a power play goal while improving. In those regards, they did lose their top face-off percentage and still have just 1 win in 16 games. So another one of those divisions, a lot of things are changing that quickly, right? And that's what I like to highlight here, even though it can be a little bit frustrating. Be like, oh, okay, some teams played some makeup games. From my perspective, it changes some of the stats, right? But it also just shows how quickly a couple of wins, couple of points here and there can change the picture that quickly. And you move a team like Pata Halala, all of a sudden, hey, they're in a playoff spot. Oh, no, a couple games later, no, they're not. Just shows how close the races are as we move on throughout the season. Tier number 4, it is our core division. Let's start off at the top. Group number 1, Dynamo HC, still maintaining that top position while holding on to the best goals against average in the group and the top face-off percentage in the group, while goaltender Callum maintains the top save percentage in the entirety of the core division. We've talked about Callum quite a bit. I imagine we'll continue to do so. In 2nd place, still holding on to that position, Hiljanen Pikkukaupunki, no longer with the most PIMs. So, hey, improvement there. And Aprilia with the most blocks. So, again, some things going well for those 2 teams as they continue to try and match the pace. But you have to keep an eye out on the Cape Town Kings, up 1 position now into 3rd. They have lost the top penalty kill percentage in the group, but they also now no longer have the fewest PIMs. So they had to test that penalty kill a little bit more, lose that top percentage, but still move up a position. Not bad, all things considered. And a change here already. It was Prowlers in 4th. We will still talk about them now. They had dropped 1 spot and clearly in danger of dropping down another spot. They did keep their top goals for per game pace and the top power play percentage, but Hanu had their goal scoring pace drop from 2nd, or at least outright scoring pace drop. They are in 1st, 4 goals on 43, up from 37, but it just goes to show you have 1 key player and a total scoring pace start to drop, and all of a sudden you could be slipping up a little bit because, look at that, Kopibuti, who held 5th position, currently find themselves at the point I'm talking up into 4th while maintaining the worst penalty kill in the group. So Go figure there, but they're on the charge. Taskubilis holding down 6th position for this week, while the Gilligang maintain 7th position. Still rocking the top penalty kill, but no longer with the most amount of hits. You had Vide dropping goal scoring pace, DeSautia dropping in defensive scoring pace, but still maintaining their position and a playoff spot. Not a bad spot to be in. Raiders HC also maintain 8th position, while Philippi Parit maintained 9th, despite rocking the worst power play percentage in the group. They do have the fewest PIMs, but they also have the fewest amount of hits, and they maintain that as well. So again, not a very physical team. Not surprising that there's fewer penalties. For the 4th week in a row, Scrubs holding down 10th position, the most physical team in the group. And hey, they finally scored a power play goal as well. Not too bad. And for the 4th straight week, it is Ingolstadt holding down 11th, maintaining the lowest goals for number, having the highest goals against average. They have taken the lead for penalty minutes as well, and they have the worst face-off percentage. It's been a rough go for them as they are still winless through 20 games played. We move to group number 2, Maitoyuna still for the 4th straight week atop the group with the top goals for pace, with the top power play percentage, and in terms of their key players, Mina Olenmake, their top scorer, is the 2nd highest scoring player in the entire division. Anton now 3rd in scoring, with, at the time, had a very nice 69 points, now already up to 72. Toimi Tatula goes from 3rd to 2nd in defensive scoring, and Feki Nambo up there as well in terms of save percentage. Things are looking really good for Maitoyuna as they continue to be the favorite out of group number 2. Although in 2nd place and up 1 position, the Cost Wolves are on a really good run right now. Despite Marul dropping in scoring pace, we have to talk one more time about Skillers, who does go from 1st to 3rd in scoring in terms of total points and drops from 1st to 2nd in goals. Only has 8 goals over the last 2 weeks. But despite those struggles compared to a pace set earlier in the season, the Wolves are still, jumping up in terms of the standings. And Lazan has a good shout for that as well. Most wins of any goaltender, providing some solid efforts back there and giving his team a chance to still kind of figure out those performances and really lock in as we head towards the playoffs. Nameless was originally next, having dropped 1 position into 3rd. As you can see right now, they're down in 5th. They lost the best goals against average in the group. Jimmy Nohan's dropped in goals pace as well. And Armian Curry, who were in 4th, now find themselves up into 3rd in the middle of this week with the lowest goals against average, maintaining a perfect penalty kill while taking the fewest amount of penalties and having the top face-off percentage. It's not surprising to see them take that step up. And Nordic Nosebleed as well, originally holding down 5th position again, they're up into 4th. They've no longer taken the most amount of penalty minutes, and Jean Claus in goal is still 3rd in save percentage. So a lot still potentially changing throughout the middle of this group, while Salasiura hold in 6th place. HC Oviedo up 4 spots this week, really on the charge, despite the 5-5 record in their last 10 now, and despite still being tied for the worst goals against average in the group at a 4.5, but it is down from a 5.0. They are the most physical team in the group as well. 8th place currently, it is the Reckless Panthers, down 1 position. No longer sporting the worst penalty kill, which is nice, but they have taken the most amount of penalty minutes. So, that penalty kill has gotten some work, which isn't necessarily a good thing. HC Lisco holding down 9th. They moved up 1 position to take that spot, while Nürnberg Nidhager dropped 2 positions despite having the league interception leader in Jackie. 11th, down 2 positions, Yervan Leckie, keeping the lowest goals for pace in the group at straight 2s. They did finally score a power play goal. It is the lowest percentage in the group, and they also lost their perfect penalty kill, no longer having the fewest amount of PIMs in the league as well. Fewest amount of hits, so again, you know, the kind of correlation that we typically see there. Wildcats Esport hold the lowest spot in the group yet again, tied for the worst goals against average in the group. They have the worst PK in the group and the worst face-off percentage in the group. The math does check out there. Group number 3, the Silver Sword Griffins for the 4th straight week in first place with the best goal scoring pace in the group and no longer having the worst penalty kill. You did have Latminx dropping in scoring pace, but we have to mention Critterdus one more time, still first in defensive scoring with 41 points after a 5-point week. So the Griffins still looking very strong. Panic on Ice maintain their second place spot yet again while having the lowest goals against average in the group, the highest power play percentage in the group. They did lose the top penalty kill percentage, but 2 key players for them, have to mention Ponanen, now first in scoring in the entire division, now up to 73 points in just 18 games. Another player of elite talent finding themselves a bit further down in the ladder than you might expect, whether that be availability or whatnot. And in goal, have to mention Miga with the lowest goals against average amongst starters in the division. Tarun Gasalit holding down 3rd position with the top face-off percentage in the group, the fewest amount of penalties, the fewest amount of hits, you know what we say there, the best PK, and Nitti Virta being tied for 2nd in defensive goals with 9. No goals this week, but things still looking pretty good for Tarun Gasalit. Kella Goldcard also maintaining 4th position despite the lowest face-off percentage. And a couple of players, Rome Urali Mies dropping in scoring pace and Leviopo dropping in goals pace. Still holding on to 4th position, though. Very good to be able to maintain your spot when you've struggled a little bit compared to what you were able to do earlier in the season. But they got to be careful. A team like Pulp Odyssey, not that far behind, moving up a position this week into 5th. HC Last Resort, you know, pulling off the swap with Pulp Odyssey, but now with the most PIMs in the group for Last Resort. Toliki from 4th to 3rd in goals, though, up to 37, and Essie keeps the most PIMs in the league. So you get the good with the bad in terms of the goal scoring, but the penalties continuing to be a bit of a problem. The back check boys, once again in 7th place, while Mieskisat down 1 position ultimately. And perhaps no real surprise there, as I just noticed a typo. But you know what? We're fine. We're good, right? We're good. I don't know how to mark down numbers. Apparently, don't mind me. It's been a long week. Rodis down 1 position into 10th. They do develop the highest goals against average in the group. They also keep the lowest power play percentage. No longer have the most amount of penalties taken. Yargany no longer with the most amount of interceptions. So again, the good with the bad. You improve your discipline, but the defense may have struggled, and outright did struggle, you can say, with the goals against average going up. The Brunker Bulldogs down 1 position this week. They maintain the worst goals for average in the group, with goaltender Igor Kotskonung having the most saves. Just goes to show, seeing a lot of the puck and more than a goalie would prefer to see. The Kerbads Warriors down 1 position, now last in the group with the worst penalty kill in the group. Probably not a coincidence. Group number 4, top of the board, once again, Latunakat with the top goals for pace in the group, the top power play percentage in the group. They do have the most penalties taken, but they also have the most hits, to say the least, thanks to Mikihili, to say the least, keeping the most hits in the entirety of the league. But Hagen Hamilton now up to 1st in defensive goals with 12, at least listed. It did happen with somebody else where it's like, oh, this person's actually a forward. Website-wise, though, Hagen Hamilton under the sort is there for defenders, and with 12 goals now in 17 games. Hiatala's save percentage did drop a little bit, but it is still essentially at an 85, which is very, very stellar. But Latunakat are tied on pace with Tiki Taka. So technically, Tiki Taka holding their position for the fourth straight week. They do have the lowest goals against average in the group, but are sporting the worst power play. It doesn't really make sense. A team with that rough of a power play would be that high up and as good as they are. If they can get that sorted, I mean, they're cooking. Worth noting as well, Nicoers, one more time, third in defensive scoring now with 35 points, and has gone from first to being tied for second in defensive goals with 9 after not scoring this week. You had originally Rusty X in third, holding that position, and the Sopranos had moved up one spot in the fourth, but it is now Sopranos in third with the top penalty kill at the end of match week 4, although it has dropped since that point. They had taken the fewest amount of PIMs with the fewest hits. Again, it makes sense. Morelli dropping in defensive goals, but they're still on the rise. 7 wins in their last 10. The Carmadillos holding down 5th place, while Skyfall dropped 3 spots down into 6th. The Solution once again holding down 7th place with the worst goals for pace in the group, while EHC Ulton Esports yet again holding 8th position while retaking the worst penalty kill percentage despite having the top face-off percentage. EV Duisburg holding down 9th place, while Dompa HC maintained 10th with the worst goals against average in the group. Worth shouting out the Disney time with the most blocks in the league, while Vita Academy find themselves once again in 11th with the worst face-off percentage in the group. I think you would have sensed the theme by now. It's been pretty tough to avoid in terms of the consistencies throughout these groups. Some teams really struggling in certain regards, but still doing really well. Other teams doing really well in certain regards, but struggling in the standings. Just how quickly teams can change spots in the standings as well. Some teams being able to, fend off some of the pressure despite some of their key players underperforming. And it's those type of weeks that really help solidify you as a playoff team. It's quite the competition going on down in Core at the moment, though, specifically. And last but not least, everybody, it is our Neo division. Let's get into talking about it. Kicking things off, group number 1, Brothers in Gaming, moving up 1 position this week. Very nice. Still have the top goals for per game pace in the group and the fewest amount of penalties taken. Key players for them, Vader, now 3rd in scoring. Mezzarine Jack, I'm not sure, 2nd in goals with 49. And goaltender Brian, tied for the most wins. Nordic Knights, now in a tie for 2nd place with the worn-out Wise Men. For the Knights, no longer the worst goals against, or the highest goals against average, I should say. So technically the lowest. It's all about the phrasing there. They did finally score a power play goal as well, but they lost their perfect penalty kill. It is still the best in the group, and they still have the top face-off percentage in the group, while the worn-out Wise Men do take over the lowest goals against average in the group. They also finally scored a power play goal while losing their perfect penalty kill. Still the most physical team in the group as well, with goaltender Samito being 2nd in save percentage. The Ice Raptors, after 3 straight weeks on top, fall down to 4th position, while Sierra Junta hold in 5th with the top power play percentage in the group. Hawks HC, once again in 6th, maintaining the lowest penalty kill percentage, while Dave Mihet lose their top power play percentage. They still have the most penalty minutes in the group, thanks to Flammeri having the most amongst all players. Nordic Falcons still yet to score a power play goal, and they lost their lead in hits, although I do believe, no, they still haven't recovered those, so never mind. The Svizera Ravens hold 9th position with the worst goals against average in the group, while the Ice Huskies hold once again in 10th with the lowest goals for per game. Don't have the lowest goals against average anymore, though, but they do still have the worst face-off percentage, although shout out to Vegas, who has the most blocks in the league. Group number 2, we have Sala Seuru holding once again. They do have the top face-off percentage. They don't. Actually, they do. I'm losing my mind. They have the top goals for percentage. They lost their perfect penalty kill, but it is still the best. They do still have the top face-off percentage. You have to understand, I mean, they're just leading the way in most categories, so it's easy to get them confused. Of course, they acquired Suomibo, who still leads the league in hits, and Osku is still tied for third in defensive goals. The Vitapoja Vikings hold once again in second place. Still have the lowest power play percentage, but fewest amount of penalties with the fewest amount of hits. But still, second place. HC Left Academy holding in third one more time. No longer with the lowest goals against average. They also lost the top power play percentage in the group. Still the most physical team, though. Beastie Boys up 3 positions this week. They had dropped 2 spots last week, so it's a good bounce back. They now have the lowest goals against average. Lassen Lampat up 1 spot after 3 straight weeks, finishing in 6th. They regain the best power play percentage, despite having, as well, the most PIMs. So they've been in the box a lot, but when they get their chances, they are taking advantage of them. The Hanover Indians esports squad in a tie for 6th with Karit. Hanover down 2 spots, Karit down by 1, who also keep the worst goals against average in the group. And Legion HC holding in 8th. No wins in their last 10. You can check their rankings in terms of goals for, penalty kill, face-offs. It's been rough. Group number 3, we have the Typhon Veterans keeping the top power play percentage in the group. You also have Red Bull Munich Academy maintaining second position. Best goals for average, lowest goals against, top penalty kill. eBay still first in defensive scoring. Windows still tied for first in goalie wins and first in shutouts. I mean, they're doing well, but Typhon had a really, really strong week to maintain first position. Nordic Macabre find themselves up 1 position, now into 3rd, while HC Total Chaos moved up 3 positions into 4th, despite still sporting the worst penalty kill in the group. They do have the fewest penalty minutes, though, so the least amount of practice. They do have, as well, the top face-off percentage in the group. Nordic Knights down 2 positions into 5th, while the Puck Rats hold in 6th position. The Stockholm Vikings down 2 spots this week with the worst power play percentage in the group, while Utalan Palasiora hold in 8th position with the worst face-off percentage in the group, although shout out to Tim Pesky, who has the most interceptions. Red Falcons hold their position in 9th with the lowest goals for, the worst goals against average, the most PIMs, the most hits. It's going as it looks. Group number 4, top of the board. It's now HC Wolves moving up 1 position, despite losing the best goals against average and face-off percentage, but key players for them, Skeleton, 3rd in goals in the league, and Andy Jester, still 1st in save percentage and now goals against average in net. Clowns on Ice drop 1 position, losing the best goals for and power play percentage in the group, while the Flying Elbows are up 1 position. Mocha HC drop by 1 into a tie for 4th place with Wildcats Esports, who no longer have the worst power play percentage, but that doesn't mean it's good. And actually, they have reclaimed it since I first ran through the numbers. Twisted Clowns find themselves down 1 spot into 6th place, no longer with the worst PK percentage. You have Swiss Wolves Esports holding 7th place as their face-off rating and hit count improves, as does Free Swiss Elite, now tied for 1st in defensive goals with 10. Marshals hold down 8th position. Strength of the Pack for the 4th straight week hold down 9th and no longer have the league lead, or the group league in hits, I should say. And Northern Lighters, once again, at the very bottom. I'll go easy on them and just say the numbers don't look too pretty. And of course, last but not least, it is group number 5. Fallen Rangers at the top. Top scoring team in the group. Lowest goals against average. Best special teams. Top face-off percentage. Leading point and goal scorer Sebco. 99 points, 63 goals in 13 games. Yeah, you're not going to be allowed in this division next year. Zaki as well was there with 73 points. Casanova down 1 spot this week, while Veljaskunta HC once again hold in 3rd position. Defenders of Velian Poika. There we go. Not a polka. He might be dancing. He's dancing on the competition. And Maltsevi, both up there in defensive scoring and defensive goals. Karhu Kisat maintain 4th position, the most penalized team in the group, so still doing pretty well given those circumstances, while the boys are back, maintain 5th with the worst goals against average in the group. Sekatuli holds 6th position, the worst goals for and power play in the group for said group's most physical team. Ice Hockey Net Yetis hold in 7th, and last but not least, the Valtakunnan Vihatoimat squad. What a name. For me, at least, with the worst PK, fewest amount of PIMs, but also the worst face-off percentage. So I hate to say we get down to Neo when we're very far into a particular video like this, but we are, and I know you're ready for the ECL action to continue here on a brand new week. So we will wrap things up here for us on the Wraparound, heading towards the end of this season, of course. So thanks for joining us here. Thanks, as always, for supporting us at SportsGamer, and let the Week 5 action begin.